Here we are with Chapter 27, the Cold War and the American Dream. The first couple slides we're going to look at some of the changes that happened in the United States immediately after World War II, and then the rest of the notes for this section are going to deal with the juicy stuff, the Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. All right, so starting first with the end of World War II, the Nuremberg trials have already happened. Germany has been once again punished for their role. All right, so we're looking now on the home front. And what were some of the changes that took place? Well, we have to start making, having the change in production. We're not making war goods anymore, so now we're back to making consumer goods. All right, so now there's not as much of a demand, so workers are going to be laid off. You also have returning veterans that are coming home that are looking for work, right? And you're going to start having a clash between the African Americans and women, let's not forget about that, that took the jobs during the war. Well, now the soldiers come back. They're looking to get their jobs back. You now have a source of tension. All right, very famous photograph up here of the sailor kissing the woman in Times Square. All right, and then you have people down here with the newspaper showing that the war ends. So the biggie here is I want you to know that there was a reduced workforce. So now you have a lot of people competing for a very limited amount of jobs. Right, so what does the government try and do to help the veterans and also try and manage the economy? Right, well, we start to get, a couple of years after the war ends, the economy does turn around. It does start to boom. And you're looking for three reasons. People, after the horrors of World War II, they want to start families. So we're going to start looking at baby boomers. All right, talk about that word. They're going to be from this particular time period. Right, so people looking to start families, buying new homes, and then goods that they necessarily didn't purchase immediately after the war because the economy was a little uncertain. Okay, they now start to buy those things. To help veterans, the government passes the GI Bill. Right. It's for twofold. It's to purchase homes and to return to school. Okay, I want to make sure that you remember this one. Okay, and then you got a picture showing you that. It's kind of the government's way of helping acclimate veterans back into American society, allowing them to go back to school to earn degrees, improve their education. And another characteristic of the post-war period were Levittowns. Right, this is a Levittown down here. It's kind of like a suburban neighborhood where it looks like a model, right? All the houses look the same, the streets are the same, right? So William Levitt uses the assembly line. Remember we talked about Henry Ford and automobiles, okay, where you just move the house along and each person is going to add a different piece to the house, allows him to mass produce the same type of home, which then lowers the cost of homes. So you're now looking at people moving into the suburbs, right, to purchase houses like this. And this is an example of Levittown, Long Island, New York. Okay, once again, like I said, all the houses do look the same. All right, and the final piece of the post-World War II United States economy, okay, was Harry Truman as president. Right, one of the things he's going to deal with is workers who during the war were working really hard and they were promised increased pay. Well, now the war's ended, right? So now they want that increased pay. They go on. You have 4 million workers going on strike. Once again, this is immediately following World War II. We're not into the economic boom of the late 40s, early 50s. All right. Truman also tries to deal with discrimination. That would be treating somebody unfairly because of their race by doing two things. Okay. He creates a commission to monitor civil rights and also orders racial integration. So if you remember during World War II, we talked about the Tuskegee Airmen. Right. There was segregation in the military. Right, and now he's ordering integration, which would be, I know a lot of you are talking about the Jackie Robinson movie, all right, integration, okay, Jackie Robinson was part of integration in baseball, where you're combining the races together. Right? The name of Truman's administration, his presidency, was a fair deal. Okay, we've seen a lot of that. We saw a square deal with Teddy Roosevelt. We saw the New Deal with Franklin Roosevelt. Okay. Truman now comes in with the fair deal, and you're going to see almost every president since him is going to come in with some kind of plan, right, for the way their presidency is going to go. All right, now we get into the juicy stuff, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of history, right? For over, let's see, it starts end of World War II, that'll be 1945 up to 1991. We're looking at over 40 years of a continuous, quote-unquote, state of war between the United States and the Soviet Union. So after the war, we have two superpowers, and I did put these colors for a reason. Okay, the United States is one superpower, and the Soviet Union is the other superpower. right? The United States is going to be a democratic country. I have a visual coming up that'll help you separate the two. All right, so blue would be the United States, and then red is going to be communist. Right, sometimes they're referred to as the Reds. Okay, the conflict is going to be because each one of these superpowers wants to spread their political beliefs to other countries. Right, and this is going to be a major change to how we deal with other countries. That's what foreign policy means. How do we deal with countries around the world? Because we used to follow a foreign policy of isolationism, where we just worried about ourselves. And now we're going to start seeing a change where we're going to be worried about what's going on around the world, and we're going to get involved to make sure that things are safe and sound around the world. All right, so here would be your visual showing the difference between the two. Okay, the United States is up here. The United States would be capitalism, and then the USSR, which is the abbreviation for the Soviet Union, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The U.S. follows a form of capitalism. All right, that's how our country is built, our economy is at least built on. And then I gave you some characteristics down here. I want you to hit pause and go through and read them. Okay, you'll see that, oh, this is what goes on in our country today. And then I want you to look over here at the characteristics for communism. All right, essentially what it means is that over here, the individuals have the power, and for communism, the state or the government has the power. And they're at two almost opposite ends of the spectrum, right? And it all deals with how the individual operates within that. So definitely hit pause and make sure you read through those, because you will need to know the difference between capitalism and communism. Right? This is just kind of a little background on what leads to or causes the Cold War to occur, right? And this is something that's important down here. All right? It says an era of high tension. Now, the United States and the Soviet Union don't ever actually go to war, thank God, right? Because we both have nuclear weapons, but it's a period of 40 plus years of friction, of almost a state of war between the two, where that conflict is going to manifest itself in other small conflicts around the world. For instance, there might be two countries that are at war with each other. One is supported by the United States and one is supported by the Soviet Union. Right? So here would be the philosophical differences, all right, based on the economy, the country. Okay, this was the issue between, what went on during the war that caused problems, right? And then this was the post-war conflict. And essentially this is the biggie here, right? During the Yalta Conference, the Soviet Union promised to allow democratic free elections in Eastern European countries that they controlled, and Stalin ended up, reneging on that deal and imposing communism on them. Right? So here's where it all starts. All right? It starts at the Potsdam Conference. After the war is over, all right, they start to decide what we are going to do with, now that the war is over, how do we go about how do we go about rebuilding Europe? All right? And like I said, Stalin is going to, all these countries over here, the ones that are in red, okay, those are all Eastern European countries that the Soviet Union, as they were advancing to defeat the Nazis, they had to occupy and take from Germany. And he promised to allow democracy to occur there, free elections after the war, and he ended up just installing communist governments as well. So you can see communism is going to start spreading through Europe. All right, this is just another kind of put the nuts and bolts of the Cold War on you here. Okay, here's the Soviet Union, the United States, and the Western democracies. Here's each country's goal. All right, maybe circle that so you know we're trying to spread communism, we're trying to contain communism, right? Easy way of remembering this, okay? Capital C, capital C. Simple enough, right? What are we trying to put in a container? We're trying to put communism into the container so that it doesn't get out and spread. Here are some of the methods. Both countries are going to spy on one another. The KGB would be the Russian form of the CIA, which would be the Central Intelligence Agency. Both countries are going to be building up their nuclear weapons, and then they have competing military alliances, which we're going to look at in more detail. All right, so this is a map of Asia with some of Europe over here. Communism starts in the Soviet Union. All right, so all the red are communist countries. And what do you start to notice based on this map? That communism is spreading this way, and communism is also spreading this way. So we have a lot of stuff going on in the news about North Korea. Here's North Korea here. We're going to look at the Korean War in the next section, right? But you can see that communism is going to start spreading out of the Soviet Union. So the question says, why do you think the communist takeover of China were the United States? Right, and that's going to be in the mid to late 40s, right? Because it now gives the Soviet Union access. Look at all the countries that the Soviet Union can now influence. Okay, it can get out into Southeast Asia. It can threaten Japan. It can get into, get into the Middle East, and then from the Middle East, it can get into Africa. All right, so the United States was looking at trying to contain communism as best they could. All right, this was the famous quote in 1946 from Winston Churchill. That's the guy that we've seen over and over again, right? Where he described what he referred to as the Iron Curtain, right? And that kind of became symbolic of what was going on in the world after World War II. Okay, based on his quote, he says, "From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent." Essentially, what he means is there is now a massive border differences, two different worlds, okay, between the communist countries over here and the democratic countries over here. So there's a clear, you can see it, that red line was already there. You can see there is a clear line border between those two ideals, and the ways of life were completely different on those sides. Okay, Greece, you can see, is kind of left to its own over here. All right, as a democratic country on this side of the Iron Curtain. All right, so a lot's going to go on in Greece to try and keep it, if you're the United States, keep it democratic. If you're the Soviet Union, turn it communist. All right, so now let's focus in on Berlin. Okay, so here's the country of Germany after World War II. All right, Germany is going to be divided into 4 zones. All right, and the Allies are going to have 3 of the zones. Well, I don't want to say Allies, because during the war they were all Allies. But the United States, France, and Great Britain are all going to have a section of Germany. And the Soviet Union is going to have the 4th section of Germany. And then within Berlin, you can see Berlin being the capital right there. Notice how Berlin is inside the Soviet section. Right? Within Berlin, they also divided Berlin into 4 sections. So the Allied countries all now control each of those different parts. So what happens is the 3 sections of Germany that are controlled by the United States, Great Britain, and France are all going to be democratic and capitalistic. The 4th section, divided by the Soviet Union, is going to be communist. Right? So 2 different ways of life. The Soviet Union is not happy that there is a communist, democratic part of Germany smack dab in the heart of communism. Right? So what Stalin does is he orders a blockade, right, of Berlin. He doesn't let anybody in or out for over a year. So what the Allies were forced to do was they were forced to fly in supplies to their sections of Berlin because they couldn't drive in, right? So they had to use airplanes to come in and drop supplies, right, in order to help the people fight communism here, right? And it was a very, very tense situation, right, because Stalin was relying on his military, right, and very quickly things could have escalated into a war. Right, and then once again, that's just showing you the different sections here. Okay, you can see Berlin. Here would be the Iron Curtain. Line here.